just going to retire. Whitey, big fan of the show. Appreciate Brian Murphy to my left, making sure everything's smooth, crispy, buttery. James Harden is systematically ruining the game of basketball. It's the most overrated player. And there you are, the Chicago Bears with a championship defense. And I'm sure Dancing with the Stars is happy to have Antonio back. If you thought you were going to get Zion, that's your bad.
Now listening to Open Season, your host, Billy.
Good evening, good evening. Welcome to Open Season. I'm your host, Billy Allen, and I'm joined, as always, by Frankie Bradica. We're chewing on a whole lot tonight. Jeff Saturday got his first win, like it or not. You probably weren't a fan of it, but Jeff Saturday got his first win. The Raiders took another loss. They dropped to 2-7. That had Derek Carr shedding a tear on the podium. The Eagles lost to the Commanders, got dominated by the Commanders. In the NFC East, all four teams could potentially make it into the playoffs. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is averaging 31 points a game. The NBA looks like it's in great hands. The Celtics are leading the way right now, and Jason Tatum looks like an MVP candidate. We'll talk about some two early MVPs, but first off, we have to get into the Colts win this weekend. Obviously, the situation Jeff Saturday brought in as the coach last week, like it or not. No head coaching experience for him. The only head coaching experience for him was in high school, where he didn't have a winning record. Like it or not, Frankie, Jeff Saturday is the coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and he picked up his first win this weekend. What did you think about the situation last week, how things went down? A lot of people aren't a fan. A lot of people don't think that Jeff Saturday deserves to be an NFL coach.
Well, listen, I'm one of those people. And again, I want him, now that he's hired, to win a lot of games, because I think that'd be the worst possible scenario for the NFL. A guy with no experience, not just no head coaching experience, has never been a coordinator, has never been a passing game counselor. He's never actually done anything coaching-wise in the NFL. He's the head coach of a franchise. So he absolutely shouldn't have gotten the job. I'm not going to go as far as Bill Cowher. I think a disgrace is the wrong way to phrase that. That I understand you should have to cut your bones before you get the opportunity. And I agree with the sentimentality. But look, he got the job. I don't expect him to turn it down. If somebody came to me and said, would you like to coach a professional team? I wouldn't say no. So I don't hold it against him. And I think it's poetic justice that he got his first win in his first game. Because I think he's more likely to actually succeed here than he would in high school, where he can't just coach them up and make kids understand. He's coaching grown men, which has to be a strength for him, especially not being an X's and O's coach.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I guess, how do you feel about it? You talked a little bit about Bill Cowher and what he said. I mean, really said it was like an embarrassment to the head coaching profession. But he really talked about like the commitment of other coaches who have been there all summer and all year prior to Jeff Saturday. I mean, Jeff Saturday apparently had said no to a head coaching opportunity an assistant coach opportunity over there. Seemed to be holding out for the head coaching job and really wasn't committing to kind of like the lower level jobs on the way up. What do you think about just the level of respect the players should have for him coming in and, just not being as committed as everybody else has been up to this point? I mean, basically it's a guy coming in off the street, hasn't put in the work. What do you think this says about it and how the players will take it?
The guys that were there all summer are like 2-6 or 3-6. Jeff Saturday's 1-1. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said about being loyal and sticking with the guys who brung you when you've gone absolutely nowhere and you've looked bad. Like that argument doesn't hold water to me. Again, I think he should have to pay some comeuppance. I think he should have to earn some stripes, but he's here now. So I'm not going to bash him before he has a chance to do anything. He's 1-0. And no coach on that team has a claim to anything besides being bad, because that's what they've been all year, is bad.
Well, one person I hope you wouldn't be too shy to bash would be Josh McDaniels, who drops to 2-7 on the season. I mean, the Raiders last year, you look at it, a team that was 7-2 in close games, one score games, and that was best in the NFL. You look at them; they kind of fought to make it into the playoffs last year, 10-6. You're saying, okay, they add Devontae Adams, they add Josh McDaniels, they should be doing pretty decent, and they're 2-7. I mean, what is it about McDaniels? I mean, he's just spectacular at ruining some of these head coaching opportunities. And what has happened so far, and why is there an issue in Las Vegas?
So the win-loss record in close games I throw out the window. That seems to flip every year. So if they were 7-2 in close games last year, logic would stand that they'll be 2-7, 4-5, something like that. So that doesn't scare me as much. They've blown 3 15-point leads. They haven't been able to win in blowouts. They haven't been able to beat up on the bottom feeders of the league, and they haven't looked even up to the standard of the better teams in the league. So what's wrong is something internal. The water smells bad. There's a fly in the ointment. Use whatever cliche you want to. Something just stinks. And it's probably McDaniels, and he's probably not going anywhere. They got a lot of money tied up in Gruden. They got a lot of money tied up in McDaniels. Now, I said to you before the show, no person should cut off their nose to spite their face in terms of their franchise if it's just money they have to pay. In terms of there's no dead cap money, it doesn't count against a salary cap, a coach's salary. It's just money. So if you're a billionaire and McDaniels and it looks this bad, it's got to be a fireable offense.
Yeah,
it was bad. It's bad right now. They don't look like they should be on the same field as some of these teams.
Yeah, and it just felt like, to me, it felt like McDaniels had learned from a lot of his mistakes. It seemed like he was hiring some of the right people, putting them in the right positions. He makes the commitment to Derek Carr right away, goes out and gets a big weapon, and you had to like the fact that they went for it in Devontae Adams. And it seems like they come out in these games pretty well prepared, but it's almost like they lose steam like after the first. It's like, they do well through the first quarter when things are scripted, but it's like once things start happening that you haven't accounted for, they just kind of unravel at the seams.
They look bad everywhere. And it's like, it doesn't make sense because their playmakers are making plays outside of Derek Carr. So Josh Jacobs has had good games. Devontae Adams has had good games. Max Crosby is having a good season. But none of it comes together. None of it's complementary. The team, they're highly penalized. They make boneheaded errors. And they just, like I said, they don't look well coached. They're not well disciplined. Their offensive line hasn't been good all year. And I don't know what's going on with Derek Carr. I can't speak to that. I was a big Derek Carr fan. He's a perennial, 10-12, 10-14 quarterback in the league. He's, he's a fantasy darling, much like Phillip Rivers was forever. You draft him in like the 12th round and he'd start for you all year. That's no small thing. Derek Carr has been consistent outside of the year he broke his back. And that year he was 12-4 before he hurt his back. So, I mean, he's always been good. He's been better when surrounded by talent. They went out and got him more talent, and he's looked pedestrian at best.
Yeah. And, Josh Dodd chiming in here saying some guys are just great coordinators. Others, and others can head coach. McDaniels is one of those guys. I mean, I guess I just feel like this time McDaniels was kind of doing more in terms of like, not trying to be the Belichick. Like he put good people in the. So is there a way that they can fix this? And do you believe anything in terms of the story of like, sounded like Brady might have gone there a few years ago. Do you think that Tom Brady, who's probably looking for another team, do you think that he could latch on in Las Vegas and kind of partner up with McDaniels, kind of saving McDaniels one last time, going out to the West Coast? Because honestly, I feel like at this point, it's probably between San Francisco and Las Vegas.
It needs to be San Francisco. It could be Vegas, but if it's Vegas, McDaniels will not be there. They didn't have a good relationship on the way out. And McDaniels is coaching what looks like a dumpster fire. I know Brady's going to be like, oh, that guy I don't like who's doing a terrible job. Yeah, he should stay. Let me go save his career again. Yeah, no, I don't see that happening. I think the dream for Brady's got to be the 49ers. If I'm the 49ers, I do it. You pay 170% of what you're paying on Jimmy Garoppolo, and quite frankly, Trey Lance ain't it jack. So you might as well let him develop under Tom Brady, and then see what you got in after the year after next.
Yeah. And it's just incredible. You're looking at that 49ers situation and giving up those 3 draft picks for Trey Lance. I mean, a lot of people want to talk about the McCaffrey trade and maybe giving up too many assets there. But I think that you would cover your bases if you hadn't messed up things with Trey Lance. And it just seems like, they've kind of given away all their draft capital that they have for the next years. They're pretty screwed, and they have Jimmy Garoppolo firmly entrenched there as the quarterback. Do they throw their remaining assets to bring in Brady? I mean, they're going to be screwed for the next 10 years or so if they bring in Brady. Do they go for it to win the championship?
I believe they should do that. I do believe they should go in for Brady, especially with Lance being under team control long enough to make that happen without having to make a real decision yet. But also, if you're going to be this screwed from a salary cap perspective and a draft capital perspective, thank God you've got a quarterback that wins 70% of his games. Thank goodness you've got a chiseled Italian god at quarterback if you're San Francisco. At least before Tom gets there, you've got a guy who's 10-2 in games where he doesn't throw a touchdown. Do you know how good that is, Billy? Do you know how hard that is to do? Only a winner with intangibles and pedigree could pull that off.
Hey, I brought you that stat on a platter, and I wish I hadn't. But look, could there be a more use? It's like, why did they win for that guy? I just don't get it. I mean, and the whole thing too with McCaffrey, I just feel like the 49ers have been so gluttonous with some of these signings. I mean, the McCaffrey thing, totally unnecessary, giving up all those picks, spending all this money on McCaffrey in an offense where, Shanahan, it could bring in kind of like anyone off the street to do well there. Did they really need to pay that type of price for McCaffrey? And could they afford to do it after signing Trey Lance? I just feel like they've really screwed themselves with some of these moves that they've made here trying to get Lance.
You can always make up for it if the owner is willing to spend money. You can always make up for things. My thing.
Hey, what about the salary cap, man?
It's in the NFL. It's nothing. It just doesn't make any sense. But Shanahan, unlike McVay, really can put anybody back there, and the machine keeps running from a running game perspective. So to trade for C-Mac made no sense. That being said, the Trey Lance thing, that has become Bradley Chubb, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. That's what you traded for Trey Lance. Even if you drafted Drew Brees, you lost that trade.
Could you really say that? I mean, you're doing a little bit of a stretch there. If you get Drew Brees.
Well, what was Drew Brees when he was drafted?
Well, I mean, he wasn't good till like 5 or 6 years into his career, but
you got to go to the right place. So what I'm saying is Miami was in a win now position. They had a guy they weren't sure that he was the guy. And through trading 1 pick, they gave him 2 weapons he desperately needed and then pass rushing on the other side, which is far more than Trey Lance has ever given them. And by the way, far more than Drew Brees gave the Chargers. Now, is it more than he gave the Saints? No, but I feel pretty comfortable in that statement.
Yeah. Well, one guy that hasn't been too good, wasn't very good early on in his career, but definitely having a good year now is Geno Smith. I know we were talking about that game, but it's just like the Seahawks have really skipped and fast forward a couple of years in this rebuild. They look great. I mean, they look better losing this game than the Broncos did winning this game. And it's just like, you look at the contrast of these two cities and just the Seahawks being able to unload Russell Wilson, having the draft that they have. And then just the Broncos, they're just kind of stuck there, still needing a quarterback, taking on Russell Wilson like this. So you just look at Seattle and it's just like, they look like absolute geniuses. It seems like they were kind of able to hide that Russell Wilson wasn't very well liked all these years. I think his marketing team has done a fantastic job, but it's finally just all the hocus pocus is kind of falling apart, and people see that Russell Wilson was a sham.
Yeah, it's really sad that it's happened this fast, but it's the same problem the Raiders have. Nathaniel Hackett's out of his depth. He really can't do this. Josh McDaniels the same way, not a head coach, not a leader of men. You've got too much talent for them to be bad. The offense not being good doesn't really make any sense. You've got good playmakers. You've got a good quarterback in theory. Like, just the idea that you can't win at the line of scrimmage 20 times a game, 15 times a game to create space for the play action and Russ to actually cook is embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, think about it. Like, I mean, where does Russell Wilson rank in terms of like quarterback play this year? I mean, if you were to cover up his face or whatever and just show you the stats, I mean, he's probably like 25th or below, maybe. Or
yeah, he's been bad. It's looked bad. And I think we hit the nail on the head. I think the Seahawks have looked better in losses than the Broncos have in wins. The Broncos are a team that have shown very little fight, very little desire to get open on either side of the ball. They look like a team that always knew that they were a Trojan horse.
Yeah. And I mean, Russell Wilson has 7 touchdown passes this year. He's thrown for 2 touchdowns in one game. I mean, other than that, it's just 1 touchdown here and there, and not even every week. I mean, it's just, I could have never believed that he'd do this. He's completing 57% of his passes. I mean, it's just like, it's a completely different guy.
It looks like Geno Smith.
I mean, honestly, Russell Wilson, we're used to seeing this guy complete like 67% of his passes. He's honestly like 10 percentage points behind it as typical year for him.
And he has probably overall a better receiving core than they do in Seattle. Yeah. Seattle's probably got the 2 better receivers, but in terms of overall pass catching talent, Denver probably has more.
Yeah.
But again, I say it every week on the show. If your big guys do not move the other team's big guys, it doesn't matter what's going on with the frosting and the window dressing. At the end of the day, if you don't win at the point of attack, you're probably going to lose in this league.
Well, that's a good point. I guess it just brings up something, before you get all these exotic options of, in terms of the offense. I mean, it's not very sexy, but you got to focus on getting an offensive line and stuff like that.
You should be able to pay an aging tackle for decent money and draft the interior of your line relatively cheaply in the NFL. And then maybe you spend a high draft pick on one or a lot of money in free agency on another. But when teams are bad at offensive line for 5-6 years, what are you doing? What is it that you're doing? Seriously. Because it shouldn't be that hard. The fact the Steelers haven't had a good offensive line since the Pouncey twins is like nuts. It makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the NFL, we honestly got the biggest game of the year this weekend, the Minnesota and Buffalo game. And I know it took us a little bit to get there, but just an incredible game. Like, you would have never thought that game would go that way at the end with, Josh Allen fumbling that ball, having the safety. I mean, it was just like, we're so used to Kirk Cousins melting down at that point and not Josh Allen. And weren't we all just thinking that it was going to be Kirk Cousins that melted down and not Josh Allen? I mean, when he threw that pick at the end, it was just, it was just crazy. And yeah, I feel like if they were to play again, the Bills would probably win by 20 points, but all that matters is what happened in the one game. But that was the best game I've seen in a long time.
That game was incredibly exciting. And I love. Yeah. It definitely, if you early on in that game, if you were watching it, even though it was slow moving, you started to favor one team or the other. And it built as it went, built to crescendo, went to overtime, was incredibly exciting. The Bills look like a team that aren't ready to win yet. The Bills look like what those Chargers teams were in the mid-2000s. All the talent, all the stats, great record. They just don't look like they're ready to win yet. Like they're ready to put their foot on the throat of an opponent. Like they can get off the field on third downs consistently. They just don't look like a team that's buttoned up at the end of games that can really hammer out wins when either they are there or even when they're not there.
Yeah. And for as much slander as I give Josh Allen or refusal to admit that he's one of the best quarterbacks or whatever people are going to accuse me of, when what it has to do to my slights against Josh Allen. I mean, any way you want to slice it, he's thrown multiple interceptions the past 3 weeks, and he's had 3 straight weeks of throwing an interception in the red zone. I mean, this is stuff that, Rex Grossman was never even able to do over a 3-game stretch. Is there any reason to be concerned with what's going on there? It feels like Josh Allen's been a lot more reckless with the football this year, already has 10 interceptions. Is he relying a little bit too much on his physical traits, trying to do a little bit too much? When I watch, it feels like he's pressing a little bit, trying to do too much.
Josh Allen is white Cam Newton. Josh Allen is super, super fast Ben Roethlisberger. The reason I don't worry about this is because he's going to likely in his career be a high turnover guy. And that doesn't mean that at the end of the year it'll look bad, but it'll mean this. You go through stretches where in 3 games he's got 6 picks or, 2 picks and a couple fumbles. I think he will always, even in his MVP caliber years, have, 2-game, 3-game stretches much like this one, because he'll never be as heady as some of the other quarterbacks. And I don't mean smart, but when your game is predicated on all the athleticism like Cam Newton, it's never going to be as precise or refined as it needs to be.
Yeah. And I mean, you saw Buffalo finally rushing for a couple scores this weekend, but, I think they had like 1 touchdown or something, on the ground through the first 8 games or something like that. Why is it that they struggle every year to run the ball? Like, why is it that Josh Allen is always their best running back? I don't understand why they can't ever run the ball.
Because you need a certain type of talent around Josh Allen to make it work. They've never drafted a great running back. They have an offensive line that is better at pass blocking than run blocking. They have receivers on the outside. I mean, even when he's passing, he's still getting hit. So they just don't have a great offensive line. So a quarterback that escapes is a better option than letting Devin Singletary get blown up in the backfield. Even though he's running the ball well, so I don't mean to discourage him.
Yeah. I mean, God, Justin Jefferson, I mean, what a trade that was. It was so when Steph Diggs was traded to Buffalo, it was for the pick that took Justin Jefferson. Is there any question that you'd rather have? I feel like we'd all definitely rather have Justin Jefferson over Diggs at this point. I mean, nobody's ever done the things that Jefferson has done through this point in his career. He's already got 20 100-yard receiving games, through these first 3 seasons. That's more than anybody else. Honestly, he looks better than Randy Moss did through the first 3 seasons.
No, he doesn't. He is more productive, yes. That's like when Antonio Brown was the most productive receiver any receiver's ever been for 5 years. That did not make him better than Owens, better than Rice, better than Moss, better than anybody. It just meant that for a 5-year period, he was more productive than any other receiver had ever been for a 5-year period. Justin Jefferson is amazing. It's him and Chase, the best receivers in the game.
Wow, no love for Cooper Kupp.
But here's the deal. I'd probably rather have Justin Jefferson in a playoff game. But if you ask me today, gun to my head, a game for my life right now, I'd rather have Diggs in a playoff circumstance. I've seen him kick the Saints off the field. I've watched Stephon Diggs in the playoffs make plays. Even Moss struggled to make plays in the playoffs. It takes a while. Peyton Manning, it takes a while for players to get that mental toughness and fortitude and thick skin to be great playoff performers, typically speaking.
Yeah. No, that was a fun game to watch. I mean, you realize that I feel like Kirk Cousins and Jefferson really do have a lot of chemistry. I mean, we make fun of Kirk Cousins because he can never kind of execute in the the clutch moments. But I mean, he threw a lot of those balls where only Jefferson could get it. I mean, it was nice to watch the rapport that they had. It was kind of like they were just throwing around in the backyard. And it's pretty amazing that Justin Jefferson can still get that separation when, there's plays where there are guys grabbing his jersey, interfering with him. He still catches the ball. It's just, to your point, Moss was still better than him. Obviously, you'd rather have Moss, but he's really been the most productive receiver we've seen just do it game in and game out. I mean, he is like automatic 100 yards. It's crazy. He's on pace to go over 2,000.
He's incredibly exciting, and he's got the full route tree. I love Justin Jefferson. I really do. I've just not seen him ever take over a playoff game, and I won't until he gets there. It's not his fault. But I've not seen it yet. So to the original appointment, yes, that was a great trade, but for both teams. Because Diggs has been amazing in Buffalo and has changed life for Josh Allen. They both got what they needed.
They sure did. I mean, that's why for the Patriots, like, how do you not bring in that type of weapon for Mac Jones?
Because we're catering to an out-of-touch old man who's barely hanging on to an unnecessary record that he has to beat, even though he's going to win 7 games a year to get it done.
Yeah. But I mean, you just see this happening with, you bring in one of these receivers and like, look what it did for Buffalo. It not only took Josh Allen to the next level, it took Stephon Diggs to the next level. It just feels like a no-brainer to bring in, do whatever it is you can. And you just realize how important these receivers are now to the game. Like, years ago, this was not the case, but it's a receiver's game now.
Yeah, but Tua is the same way. You bring in Waddle, you bring in Hill, and he looks like a different quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I'm saying.
You have to surround these guys with talent. And one thing I did want to say about you, they look like they were in the backyard and he threw it where only Justin Jefferson could catch it. Yeah, but not in a precision way. In like Carson Palmer throws the ball 100 miles per hour to anywhere on the field, expecting Chad Johnson to lay out and make a play. I mean, a lot of those catches were where one guy could get it because it was uncatchable, and Justin Jefferson just made it catchable. This also, for Justin Jefferson, was his lowest yards per separation in any game he's ever played, and that is for both targets and catches. So that is maybe a point to where.
So is that to say that Kirk Cousins gets no credit for the throws? Then you're that did not sound like a compliment, I guess.
The stat I gave would usually lean towards complimentary and favorable for the quarterback, and meant that they're throwing into tight windows and it was still being complete. But when that guy is Kirk Cousins and he's making boneheaded decisions, and I watched the game, no, that's all on Jefferson, baby. Jefferson was outstanding in that game. Kirk Cousins was right bang mediocre.
God, there was one of those picks. He threw it like straight into the defender's chest. I mean, that was
unexplainable. That wouldn't have happened if Jimmy G was the quarterback.
Yeah, Jimmy G would have just thrown no touchdowns, and they would have lost that game by 30.
Not true. Justin Jefferson is that much better than Debo.
Well, there's no question about that. But I also feel like Debo doesn't have a quarterback who can get him the ball like Kirk Cousins can.
They're the same quarterback. Kirk Cousins and Jimmy G are the same quarterback.
Kirk Cousins is way better than Jimmy Garoppolo.
No. One just puts up more stats and one just wins more games. They're the same quarterback. They're both.
Put Kirk Cousins on the 49ers, he'd win more games.
They're both slightly faster Chad Penningtons. Do not overrate either one of them.
Oh, I'm not overrating either of them, but I don't think you're going to find many people that would take Jimmy Garoppolo over Kirk Cousins.
I know a lot of people who lose money while gambling on sports. I know who I'm taking, and my guy wins 70% of the time.
That stat will fall. That stat will fall. There's going to be a point where he loses.
Garoppolo.
And then you will have nothing.
Garoppolo for life, baby.
Well, that doesn't sound like there's any bias there.
No. Objective as it comes, sir.
So the Commanders gave the Eagles their first loss. A lot of people thinking maybe that the Eagles are pretenders. They fall to 8-1, still the best record in the NFL. I guess for you, do you think that they're a fake team? Are they still one of the top teams in the NFC to you, or in the NFL? Like, what happens have they just played an easy schedule? How are you looking at the Eagles at this point?
The Eagles have played an easy schedule. There, this loss didn't like make me say one or the other. Drinking game, that you'd all be drunk. You'd all be drunk. But also, I wish somebody would take the stat away from me because it's so damn good. It's so if in anything else sports related, you were like, hey, that guy gets on base 70% of the time. He has on base, like, you know what I mean? Like, are you serious? It's outstanding. Like, he goes, and he's a running back. He goes for 100 yards 70% of the games he's in. That guy rushes for 2,000 yards.
Yeah, too bad that Garoppolo can't play 70% of the eligible games because he's hurt 70% of the time.
I'm just saying, for a guy who's not supposedly any good, you'd assume that CJ Beathard could win the same 70% with that system. If it's just roll out the balls and let him play, boys, then somebody else, Shanahan's record would be so paltry without him.
So Kirk Cousins would have a worse record than Jimmy Garoppolo would if he was playing with the 49ers. Is that it?
Comparable. I'll tell you what. He wouldn't have got to the Super Bowl with Jimmy G, which Jimmy G did. But he probably would have won that MVP that he was close to winning in Minnesota because he would have had better numbers.
Oh, hey, Jimmy tried his best to derail their Super Bowl hopes. I mean, they allowed him to throw the ball like 8 times in the second half of that Green Bay game. I haven't seen a quarterback more tightly managed than Mac Jones in that first Buffalo game last year. I mean, Christ.
I don't recall. What I will say is he wins 70% of his games. And if you're going to talk about a quarterback who you're not sure of not crapping their pants in the playoffs, then what you're not going to do is have your man be Kirk Cousins in that argument. Because no, sir, I don't accept it. As I said, if you swap them out, Kirk Cousins probably wins an MVP, which he was close to in Minnesota. But he doesn't take that team to a Super Bowl. Because when they start to take it out of his hands, he'll check out of some of those runs, which Jimmy did not do, and throw it to the other team. Because he's a bum-ass quarterback. So, no, Jimmy G is better than Kirk Cousins. Less productive, but stats are not that important. The guy wins. Billy, he wins.
So speaking of somebody who's having a tougher time winning this year is Mac Jones. I mean, last year he led the Pats to 10 wins as a rookie. Obviously, not doing well in a lot of his statistics, really regressing in a lot of areas. He's got a matchup against the Jets this weekend off the bye. I mean, I would have liked to see Bailey Zappi get put back in there, but we all know it's going to be Mac. Last game, it felt like as long as Zach Wilson didn't just throw the ball, if he threw the ball out of bounds on a couple of those plays where he had thrown picks, they probably win that game by 20. Is Zach Wilson going to be that bad again? Will they take the ball out of his hands? I mean, he's performed a little bit better since that game. So just, he kind of got things back going again. So will Bill Belichick make him look as, pathetic as he did the first time around?
If Zach Wilson's going to turn his fortunes around against us, he's going to need to scramble. Because the worst version of the Pats defense in the Bill Belichick era is that mush zone that he plays against people that he considers scrambling threats, where it's just gap integrity and maintain your lanes and nobody actually rushed the quarterback. And it's just 8 seconds, the guy is back there and eventually somebody's open for a 4-yard pass. So that's how he fixes that. I think we'll win. But if I'm being honest, this past Sunday was the best the Patriots offense has looked all year. And I understand that they didn't play. But it was the first time all year that they didn't make one bad decision, that there wasn't one bad coaching call. I think there's something to be gained from this past Sunday of mistake-free football by this offense.
Oh, I love that joke there. He's a funny guy, eh? Yeah, so I guess just when you kind of look at one of the big stories is Watson going to be coming back, starting to practice. He's going to be returning to practice tomorrow. What are your expectations for him? I feel like he's going to have a lot of rust. I would be surprised if we see him do very well the first couple games. I feel like like aside from Garrison Hurst, I can't remember somebody that was out of the NFL for 2 years and came back and was very effective. I think
Ricky
the
Williams.
rest of this year for him is going to be kind of a lost year, and then I think we can kind of start to evaluate him this year. Are you expecting much from him when he returns this year?
Ricky Williams, no? Was out for 2 years, came back and was productive?
Yeah.
Also, how long was Palmer out?
Who, Carson Palmer?
Raiders to Arizona, how long was he out for? I know he retired. How long was he out for?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I'm saying, it's happened a couple times.
It's rare. Yeah, I don't really have a comment. I just really like Ricky Williams, and you brought him up, and you brought up Garrison Hurst to prove that point. Ricky Williams has got to be the guy.
Well, I'm saying Garrison Hurst ran for like 1,200. Yeah, like I think he had like a Pro Bowl year after being out for a couple of years.
So did Ricky.
He made the Pro Bowl.
He had the rushing title after he came back from being in a tent.
He did not win the rushing title. He won the rushing title before he went away.
Thought he won it in 2002. Didn't he go on his hiatus in 2000? After New Orleans?
No. Check yourself.
Is my timeline off?
Yeah. But anyway, do we get an answer to that question, or are we just derailing into Ricky Williams?
No, I got sidetracked. Repeat your question verbatim.
Well, I mean, basically, what's your expectation? So he's saying the Browns got 300 million reasons to start Watson. Shame to see him back. Basically, I was saying I feel like the rest of this year is going to be, the point was that there was a long layoff for these guys.
But
and
he's a quarterback. But Deshaun's a quarterback. I think it's much harder to do that as a running back, as a wide receiver, as a player that gets hit. Deshaun Watson, I think they'll be rust. I think you're right in saying that. But I don't think that they've played particularly hard for Brissett. I don't see that. I don't. I think that team plays hard because Nick Chubb runs hard. But when Nick Chubb finally has less than 9 in the box because they've got a serviceable quarterback, the offense should open up even if their quarterback is overthrowing early on, is underthrowing early on. The fact that he is there and a weapon and you can pair him with Chubb should be beneficial for that whole offense. I think he'll win well before he's statistically good. I think that team will win right away when they insert him. I think it'll be a while before you see 300 yards, 80 completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, and no picks, that type of game.
Yeah. So, one guy we did see with a big game this weekend was Aaron Rodgers, finding some decent rapport with Christian Watson, and obviously hasn't really experienced anything like that since the loss of Devontae Adams. Did Green Bay find anything this weekend in that win against the Cowboys? I mean, obviously the Cowboys were up by a couple touchdowns. It's nice to see one of the younger weapons come on for Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't trust the young guys typically. Is Green Bay poised to straighten things out here, or is this season completely in the tank for them?
They'll probably figure it out in terms of they will go back to beating up on their division and beating up on the bad teams. Christian Watson dropped a couple passes early, so the only credit I'm going to actually give Aaron Rodgers is that he's stuck with him. Because it's not just Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers especially tends to close guys out of that circle of trust. Not unlike Brady, not unlike Manning, not unlike other guys, but Rodgers especially. So for him to drop a couple balls early on before he took off, and for Aaron to stay with him, I think says something about Aaron's desperation for needing a playmaker. That being said, this kid's 6'5", he runs a 4.3. His problem, and he runs good routes. His problem is that he has bad hands. So I do not consider him to be a week in, week out threat. He's going to emerge himself as a slightly less talented DK Metcalf, who's also not a week-to-week guy. That's a guy who's going to catch 10 passes for 200 yards and then 2 passes for 27 yards because they just don't have the full route tree or hands to be covered when they're uncovered.
Somebody who has become a week-to-week guy this year has been Tua Tagovailoa. Throws for 3 touchdowns again this weekend and getting carried off the field to MVP chance, Frank. Would you have ever believed that would be the case coming into the season? Things have totally changed around. I got to admit, I did not think overall the Tyreek Hill signing would be a huge success. Obviously I thought it would make them better, but I just didn't think they'd have this type of chemistry. And thought overall, you'd kind of still be looking at bringing in another quarterback there in the future, but that's definitely not going to be the case. Are you evaluating Tunga Vailoa as at all being a potential MVP candidate? How impressed are you by this guy that he's just turned things around? I just feel like this is, you knew he was going to get the weapons, but the things that he's doing as far as completing these balls, down the field, leading in yards per attempt, yards per completion, has really reinvented himself.
Also first in air yards, so just the amount of yards he's let go from his arm. And again, I think it was always possible coming into the year, to answer your first question, he was an MVP candidate, right? In the same way Phillip Rivers had a couple years up there, Kirk Cousins is at a top 3 year. I thought the team could have been good enough and he would have been serviceable. But what I thought from him was 70 completion percentage, 45 at most 100 yards, call it 32 touchdowns, and keep your turnovers really, really low. What I'm now seeing is that they're asking him to do it a completely different way. They're maximizing those receivers with him. And yes, the completion percentage is still there. And yes, his headiness and his quick trigger is still there. But also when he holds the ball, he's holding it for a purpose and getting it down the field. And to Josh's point, Mike McDaniels, one of the best and most almost I don't know if he's naive like Rain Man or he's a freaking genius. His sound bites are amazing. His press conferences are a true joy to watch. He's unbelievable. I can't tell if he's like an idiot savant or if like he's just not here for it and he'd rather always be coaching football. But he's got a wonderful personality. He projects really well. And for a team that just got rid of Brian Flores, a guy that they played hard for and did nothing but win for them, I think it's massively important that he came in and was this good, and he has been.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I just can we check you there a little bit on the first part of that? You said that you could see Tunga Vailoa having an MVP as a season where he'd be considered for MVP coming into this.
Yes, but I didn't think it would look like this. Even in saying yes, I did. I didn't think it would look like this. Again, when Kirk Cousins was top 3, I didn't think he was very good. So I don't. Kurt Waters, I believe, a 2-time, but you can win MVP and not be the best quarterback in the league. You can win that award simply because, just like in the NBA, Steve Nash won too. Sometimes you're just on the best team and you're the best player on that best team. So I thought there was a chance he could put up that campaign. I didn't think he would ever warrant it. Right now, what's more scary is that he deserves 10 weeks in to legitimately be considered an MVP. And that's not something I would have said coming into the season. Did I think pundits, USA Today, Pro Football Focus would have him high up there? Yeah, I thought there was a chance. Did I think I would? Did I think it would be overwhelming and undeniable? Not a chance.
Yep. Now you talked about being the best player on the best team. If we switch things over to the NBA, Jason Tatum has definitely been the best player on what has become the best team, the Boston Celtics, getting out to this start. And, it just seems like he's really done a lot this year to, be a lot more consistent on defense, but also, been over 20 points in every game. As far as closing these games out, you can go to him and you're looking at him as an MVP candidate early on in this season. I feel like it kind of shows that he really has taken this next step. I mean, I think we knew that he was, on one of the all NBA teams, but we were kind of wondering where he would be. And it definitely seems like he's one of the top couple players. And if basically if the season were to end today, I mean, he would be a top 3 MVP candidate.
Apologies. I said, yeah, it's him, Luka, and Giannis, but if Embiid puts together a couple performances like he did the other night, I mean, the sympathetic pick for the season is Embiid. He was robbed last year, and he's probably the most talented big man we still have in this league. He puts together another 50-plus performance, we're going to start to change our opinion. But right now, it's definitely Luka firmly in first. Where I'm happy with Tatum is it just looks like he's massively more efficient. He's a better playmaker getting shots for the other team, even if it's the hockey assist, not necessarily his assist going up dramatically. He seems to be better defensively, seems to be better with help defense. He's blocking more shots this year. It just seems like he's better at everything.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And, Marcus Smart last night too, having a good year as far as like the assist to turnover ratio. You're just kind of seeing this team, this team is crushing it on offense, but they still are not quite where they need to be defensively. Do you think they're going to get that defensive edge back when Rob Williams comes back? I mean, what do you think it is as far as like why they've lost their defensive edge this year?
Because they don't have a defensive edge, because they have Robert Williams. I think people in Boston just forgot. Marcus Smart was a good defender, when we had a bad defense and no rim protector, and our defense was bad. I think Robert Williams is what changes that. What I would have liked to have seen is for us to have good defensive numbers without him. And then when he comes back, we really actually solidify and cement ourselves as being in that top tier, top echelon of teams. Right now, I'm just not convinced. And we're the best team in the NBA. I don't think it's looked very good. I think if you take Tatum out and put him in a vacuum, the rest of the Celtics season has really been quite disappointing. And I understand that he's been so good and the record is what it is. But A, we haven't played a lot of dominant teams. And B, well, we've played teams with good records, but that's because right now teams like the Cavs have good records. Like, overall, we haven't played a lot of games where it's been a question who the best player on the floor was. It's been Tatum. And my point with Tatum, just like any superstar, is going to be, I need him to be the best player on the floor, even when he's probably not the best player on the floor. Like, if he goes up against Giannis, Giannis is better than him. But can he be better than Giannis for 4 out of 7 games? Like, that's the step I really need to see from him. But the rest of the Celtics, they haven't been that great. They've all been kind of playing to par. I will say Malcolm Brogdon has been good. Everybody else has been bang average and bad defensively.
No, that's a good point. And I mean, Tatum has elevated his game so much that he is kind of carrying the rest of the players on board with him. But I do think that you're right as far as like when he looks across the floor, like he's pretty much elevating himself. Like, when he played Morant, he made sure he was the better person, better star in that game. When he played Jokic the other night, obviously he was better than Jokic in that game. So, I think Tatum is considered as the best player in a lot of these matchups now. I mean, and the NBA is kind of looking at him the same way.
If you're going to be a top 1, 2, 3 player in this league, don't you have to? Every single time you're a superstar in the NBA and you step on the court, it's a 1-on-1 game of 5-on-5. If you're LeBron and Carmelo, if you're Kobe and Dwayne Wade, if you're Shaq and Hakeem, like, we know that there's 5 players for each team on the court, but there's one. There's really one. And if you've got the guy in this league, you're probably going to win. Tatum is ascending to be that guy. Now, is he or isn't he? This is, piss or get off the pot type of territory.
Yeah. And I mean, I just feel like his trajectory has been absolutely incredible. I mean, with all of his, all of his skills and gifts as far as like how tall he is and how long he is. I mean, he really does improve every year. And I mean, I feel like it's noticeable what he's done on defense as well. I feel like you could definitely argue that he's one of the most complete players in the game. And I mean, we didn't necessarily think you'd be saying that when he first came out. A guy next to him, Jaylen Brown, is a guy that's gotten better a lot too. But I feel like we do have to give a lot of credit to Tatum, who's really raised his game defensively too. I mean, I feel like you could argue he's been their best defender this year, which I didn't know if we'd be saying that a few years ago when he was first taken.
Brown doesn't seem comfortable. Brown really doesn't seem comfortable, and I don't know what that is, but he doesn't seem to be the same, and it's really disappointing. And it's not been dramatic, but defensively, he's gambling more. He's getting blown by more. Offensively, I mean, he's always been streaky, but I feel like I've seen less of those flaming hot streaks. I just feel like he's taken maybe not a step back, but certainly a step of regression, a step of plateauing.
Yeah. Well, I feel like Jalen still had a pretty good offensive year.
Sure, but
And I do feel like he's kind of learned that he is definitely the number 2 option on this team, which is nice for that situation to finally be settled.
Can you win with him as your number 2?
I think if you have a great rest of your team around him, I mean, ideally, he's probably not your number 2.
He's a 3.
But I don't think that's that bad, though, if he's your 2.
He's
like,
if
Steph Curry's your 1 and Jaylen Brown's your 2, I mean, you could win with that. I mean, like, if Durant is your number 1 and Jaylen Brown's your number 2.
If you have Jaylen Brown and Steph Curry, do you know who you absolutely need to make that work?
Some good defender.
Draymond Green. You know who makes that work, buddy? Do you know who allows? Because you said you would need a great team around him if he's your 2 to win. Yeah. So if you have Steph Curry, the best shooter ever, and you have Jaylen Brown, a good 2-way player, much like Klay Thompson, then the only thing that makes all of that fit in the pot and taste good is Draymond Green, who can guard the 1 through 5.
What about Embiid and Jaylen Brown as your top 2?
Not good enough. Unless Embiid wants to turn it on and be the best player in the world. Jaylen Brown could be your number 2 if you have the best player in the world.
Well, fine. Who's a better duo right now than Tatum and Brown? They're averaging more points than anybody together in the NBA.
I mean, yeah, but I think that they're a duo because they're together. Jason Tatum is like dramatically skewing the numbers for that duo right now.
I mean, Jaylen Brown averages 25.5 points a game. I feel like you're saying major regression. I just got to stand up for Jalen a little bit here. I'm not the big
defensive regression, offensive plateauing. Also,
I mean, the guy's shooting like 48% from the field and averaging 25.5. I don't know how much of a
12 games into the season. Those numbers are going to find their level. There are dudes shooting like 6 threes a game and still averaging 42%. All those numbers are going to find their level. Lauri Markkanen is not going to shoot 50% for the 3-point line.
All right, so what level is that going to find that year? So how many points is he going to average then if it's so out of whack?
He's probably 23. I don't care what his offensive numbers are. He's been bad defensively. And he's also, in the grand scheme of building a big 3, he's a 3. He's not a 2. And if he's your 2, you better have the best player in the world. And
that's a greedy team. That's a greedy team for him to be your 3. I just don't know how many teams. I mean, like, what team are you putting together where he's the 3rd? Like, I don't know how often you're going to have a team that's so talented that he's your 3rd option, I guess. Like, he's kind of like a 2.5 or 2.
He's a 2.5. He's just not a full 2. He's not. He's not Dwayne Wade on that Heat team. He's not Kareem. He's not McHale.
I mean, D-Wade was like the best. D-Wade was like the best number 2 option ever.
He's Pippen. And I know people like to romanticize that Pippen was almost an MVP, but honestly, blow me on that. Pippen was never the best player in the world. He was never a definitive number 2. When he went other places, he was a 3 and a 4, which is more what he would have been. If they had traded, get out of here with the Grant Williams nonsense. No, I've had it with the Grant Williams nonsense. I said it last week. He's Jared Sullinger. He's worse. Jared Sullinger was self-aware. Grant Williams is awful. He's awful, and he's going to get paid a bucket full of money, and it better not be for my team. Can't stand him.
Jared Sullinger was a monster on the boards, too. I mean, that guy could use his body.
Guy had an absolute dumper. You park that thing down, take 2 dribbles, and flip it. Oh, he was cold as ice with that big booty and those thick legs. That guy was a houseboy. Loved me, Jared Sullinger. He just had no back and no knees, so he had a very short shelf life.
Grant Williams is so hateable. I just don't get why. He's like the suck-up player that's like the first one off the bench to high-five people that really has no skill. I mean, sure, he has improved and he can shoot threes. Like, I don't even want to say that, but it's like the data at this point, I can't dispute it. Like, he can shoot threes. I don't
Allow
know
me.
how long this is going to last, but for the last 2 years plus, he's been able to.
Allow me to go right against all of that data. Guys like Jason Capoto, Kyle Korver, Joe Alexander. The fact that he is shooting threes right now is because there's no pressure and nobody guards him. If you put a hand in that man's face, he will shoot nothing. 2 years top 10 in the league. That and 25 cents will buy you a soda pop in the 50s. I just don't. People are shooting so many threes. So you're looking at him averaging a super high percentage, probably only getting, 150 attempts, all wide open. So yeah, he's top 10 in the league because the superstars of this league take 400 a year. So their numbers dramatically just get skewed because it's actually a better sample size. Because he's been good for 2 years, he was bad in the not bad in the playoffs from three, but his numbers eventually found level. He wasn't top 10 in the playoffs. He's Joe Ingles. He's Joe Ingles. He's not a guy that can shoot when people actually guard him. He's a regular season darling. I don't know why I'm explaining this. The best thing he brought to the Celtics last year in the playoffs was defense on guys bigger than him, which this year he has not been doing as well, and he's been complaining much more.
I know. I wish Tatum would stop complaining, but I mean, we just have to take it at this point.
It's so bad. We've been so unlikable for so many years because our team is just incorrigible. They're just juvenile, sophomoric, whiny prima donnas. But now we finally have enough talent that makes it worth rooting for because we might win. So go Celts. Woo!
So I mean, another team that's well, I guess just to go to the Lakers. You saw Anthony Davis play the other night and have like a 35 and 15 game, kind of turning back the clock. I mean, God, I feel like I'm expecting Anthony Davis to be like 35, 36 years old. Like, I can't even believe this guy's only 29. I feel like he plays so old at this point in his career. It's almost kind of like a shame when you see a game like he had the other night. He's like, I got your back, saying that to the coach and everything like that. I feel like, honestly, a game like that just highlights how disappointing Anthony Davis has been over the past few years. I mean, the fact that this guy hasn't won an MVP to this point in his career is just like, it's ridiculous.
When you look at it,
I feel like he's always missing games because he can't play through, little injuries. Honestly, that game the other night made me more mad than happy. Because you're like, he could do this. He just doesn't have the fortitude.
When it comes to Anthony Davis, the difference between his actual production and accomplishment versus potential production and accomplishment is so dramatic. No, I mean, it's the story of the NBA, yes. But for this guy's got the potential to be Durant. He's got the potential to be a unicorn. The fact that he's been a nothing his whole career. His best season came when Rondo and DeMarcus Cousins were the story prior to being with LeBron. That was the best thing he'd ever done.
LeBron was supposed to pass the torch on to this guy, and LeBron is still better than him in year 20. Like,
LeBron is getting a lot of slander this year. The guy's a top 2, top 3 player in the league still.
I agree.
And right now he can't hit water from a boat in terms of his jump shooting. But he's bullying his way to 28, 8, and 8. The guy is just an absolute warrior, even when he's like on the decline. Anthony Davis, he's a never was, not even a has been. The guy's a never was. He's Kyrie Irving. He's got that one big three, just like Kyrie Irving, except Anthony Davis's happened against the worst team in a bubble.
Hey, man, bubble championship counts just as much as a regular championship.
I suppose.
Do you agree?
It doesn't really. No, the bubble championship is like NFL championships. They matter. We want to record log the whole thing. All right? But the further you get away from the last NFL championship and the first Super Bowl, the less we value those things.
Oh.
That bubble was not real.
Well, we value everyone for tuning in tonight. That is going to conclude it for this episode of Open Season. We will see you next week, same time, same place, and we'll talk to you then.